I don't know if you've ever asked yourself the question of like, do I find myself beautiful? Learning to love all parts of myself includes loving the parts of me that I don't want people to know about, the parts of me that I struggle with, the parts of me that people love, the parts of me that people question, the parts of me that people think are too much. Hello, my name is Muthoni Gitau. Welcome to another episode of Just Doing Life, the podcast, a space where we explore all the parts of life that we do not like to say out loud. After all, we are all just winging it. Yo, we made it to episode 2. Can you believe that? That means we didn't give up. That means we did not give up. So welcome to another episode. I just first want to say thank you for all the love that you showed me in the first episode, because I was freaking out. I had like so many things happening. And then on that day, I had to be at work, which my work means I'm at a site. So there's construction happening, and then there was things happening where I was like, oh, I changed the timings. Initially, I was going to drop the episode at 11. Then I was like, let's just do it at 10. And then 10 was too close to the time. There was a lot happening. But the first episode went out. And thank you for all the love, for the participation, the comments. Oh, I got such nice comments. I appreciate comments, especially in terms of feedback. I really appreciated that. I think one of the sweetest things that I received in terms of like the comments of someone saying, oh, it sounded like talking to a friend. And I was just like, oh, thank you. I was so happy about that. And turns out I'm not the only one with a birthday thing. Kumbe tuko wengi. I did not know there's so many of us. So that being said, moving forward, I decided that my birthday is going to be a 2-day affair, because I don't want to let go of the date that I have been using. And I don't want to just completely forget about it, because like I said, I am attached. And now that there's this other date, I was like, you know what? We can find a way to work both of them out. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about learning to love myself, like how I have learned and I'm still learning to love myself. But before we get into that episode, you can follow us on our social media. Last time I lied. I said we're only on Instagram. I forgot, because TikTok is such a new space for me, because I go to TikTok to consume stuff mostly, not to post. But now we are delving into that world. We are deciding to put ourselves out there. So we are on TikTok and Instagram. The handles for both of those pages is at JDL, the podcast. And on YouTube, of course, Just Doing Life. That is the name of the channel. Please subscribe and follow us on socials. And also you can find this podcast on your favorite podcasting platforms. We're still working on getting on some of them, but just go search Just Doing Life, the podcast, and you will see our gorgeous, beautiful purple floral banner, okay? With an image of me with a flower crown. Why not? So yeah, be sure to check out our socials, because we are also trying to grow those pages, okay? I don't know if you've ever asked yourself the question of like, do I find myself beautiful? So it's like, for me, I didn't ask myself that question. It was one day I realized that it had taken me so long to look at myself and see beauty in myself. And that came from childhood, basically. So I want to talk about my childhood a bit in this episode, and how my childhood relates to how I show myself love now, and how I was showing myself love before I started really learning how to love myself, and the importance of all that, I guess, to me especially. So I grew up in Kawangware. For those who do not know, Kawangware is a small quote-unquote village, aka slum, in Nairobi, Kenya, and it's adjacent to the lavish burbs of Lavington. I grew up right next to a school, group of schools now. I grew up right next to Rusinga School, and it was always so interesting seeing life. You know, like when you see that life and then you're seeing your life and they're so different and you don't understand why. Because as a child, you're just like, oh, they get to do that. We don't. And then you just move on with life, I guess. But I think that kind of stuff shapes how you grow up. When I was young, I noticed a lot of patterns. I think one of the things I do a lot is I observe. I observe a lot, not just younger, like even as a young adult, when I would walk into rooms, people would assume I was very quiet at first. And then later on, once they got to know me, they'd be like, oh, kumbe, you can be talkative, because they would think you can be talkative, you can be quiet. But for me, it was always because anytime I would walk into a room first, I would observe first. I would never be the first to start the conversations or anything, like especially a new space, a space I've never been to before. It was always observation mode first. Observe the people, the space itself. How are people moving? How are people talking? Because for me, that helped me to gauge how I'd interact with certain people. That was how I used to interact with my environment and with people. And the observation was not just even in rooms, in spaces I was in, but also I would observe the life around me and then question how I wanted to move around in those spaces. So growing up in Kawangware, there are certain things that I knew for sure I never wanted to happen for me or to me. And I would observe how people would move, how people would act, how people would interact. And I sort of closed myself off, which for me, it was intentional. It was just like, the less I interact with the things that I don't want in my life, the less the chance of them happening to me, if that makes sense. Like, I did not want to be another Kawangware statistic, because there was this trajectory of life that was very consistent for most people. So it would be like, we go to the schools around. We had a few options. So we had Kawangware Primary. There were guys who were in a school called Kabiro Primary. There was, which other schools around there? There was Satellite Primary, but it was like a distance. People used to call it DB, right? Satellite DB for some reason. I don't know why. Which other school? But those were like the major schools. And then there were some private schools just that popped up here and there. And the people I went to school with, the people I interacted with, had gone to either of those schools. There was another one. What was it called? Kenyanjui. It's near Kenyanjui Polytechnic, but there was a primary school there as well. So people I grew up with, people I went to school with, same schools, and people who I would see around had also gone to the same schools. Then if you move slightly past Kawangware, as you're going towards Kilimani, we had schools like Kilimani Primary, Milimani Primary, there was Lavington Primary, Kileleshwa. So those were the schools that their life was, they're still public schools, but the life there was a bit fancier. Let's use that word. It was a bit fancier than Kawangware Primary. Kawangware Primary, we'd be sent home for lunch. Okay, lunch break. You've either carried your ugali skuma or you're rushing home, you walk home, you go eat your lunch, and then you walk back to school. These other schools, they had canteens and whatever, and you had lunch money, and they had halls that sold fries and whatnot. The reason I know this is because later on I did transfer, but it was just for 2 years. It wasn't for a long time. So that transfer actually it was like culture shock basically, because I was like, oh wow, there's more to this life, right? So the statistic I was talking about, there was a pattern that was repeating itself, and it was very consistent with a lot of people. And I remember thinking, I don't want to fall into this pattern. I don't want to be part of this. So it was, we go into one of these schools. We might or might not go to secondary school. That was not a given. It depends. How do you perform? Did you perform well? Did you perform well enough to go to a secondary school? Do I have the money to pay for you to go to secondary school? So you might or might not go. For some people who ended up in secondary school, they ended up dropping out after becoming pregnant. So the one thing that used to happen a lot was the pregnancy thing. When I was 10, I knew for sure I never wanted to have children. That was the first time I vocalized it. I was just like, not for me. So I knew I didn't want to have kids. And again, this space we grew up in, people did not talk about sex, the consequences of sex, the things to avoid, the things to learn from the situation. So for me, it's just like, you know what? If you don't engage in it, the chances of you becoming pregnant are like at zero. So don't engage. And I really shielded myself, and I disappeared into the world of books, movies, and TV shows. That was my world. And I would disappear and live my days when I'm at home watching stuff or reading stuff, and I would only leave the house in the evenings. So this was like now when I was in high school, when I'd be on holidays, I would lock myself up in my mom's house the whole entire day. If something needed to be gotten at the shop, it's either I go really early in the morning before people are moving around, because again, I don't want to interact with people, or in the evening once it's dark and you can't tell it's me. So that I had a system, and that system worked for me. It worked in my favor. So you either drop out of high school because you became pregnant, or you finish and then the first thing you do is you get pregnant. And then after getting pregnant or becoming pregnant, there was one of two options that I noticed. It was you give birth and then you leave your child with your mom, you go hustle and raise our child. Or two, you and whoever got you pregnant would shack up and hustle and raise a child. Again, for me, I was just like, this is not the life for me. This is not what I want for myself. And again, shield. So that was the statistic I did not want to become a part of. I was very, very clear on that's not going to happen for me or to me at all. I refuse. So I started building my world in my head. I would take myself out to experience things that normally for guys like us, they want experiences you were expected to have or experiences you would indulge in. So I would take myself for movies. I'd go to the theater to watch plays. And for me, it was more like I'm introducing myself to things outside the community I grew up in and the space I grew up in, where life was very one-directional. I grew up around people who had never set foot into Nairobi CBD. I grew up around people who, if they set foot into CBD, it was because they are going to shags. So they only know one spot in Nairobi CBD, which is the spot where they get their buses or matatus or shuttles that take them up country. And then when they come back, if that matatu makes the mistake of not going to that exact stage, it's over for them. So I noticed there wasn't a lot of curiosity around me, and I was a very curious child. Even when I was young, I used to ask a lot of questions, and I used to ask why. I was a very, very inquisitive child. So I decided to go figure the world out for myself. After I finished high school, a lot of people who would see me during the day assumed that I had just finished class 8 and I was getting ready to go to high school, because I used to lock myself in the house whenever I'd be home. So they assumed, I was just like in a boarding school and such. And also the fact that my body size and stuff, I was a very small person. I've always been a very small person. So I never really look my age. So I would always just say, yeah. So when I went looking for colleges and campuses and whatever, and I would go to the theater to see what's happening. And I was very curious. I wanted to watch plays. I wanted to watch movies at the cinema. I would go and explore like the CBD. I would go walk around. I wanted to know where are things located? Where do you do this? Where do you do that? What are the things that people come to do in this Nairobi? So for me, I think that was the first instance of me showing myself love. When I look back, I feel like that's when I started showing myself love, because I started paying attention to the things that I wanted, the things I was curious about, the things I wanted to learn about, and I went and explored on my own. to figure those things out. I didn't know that that's what that was at that time, but I kept exploring, ended up in theater. I did a stint in theater for a couple of years. From theater, I started performing poetry because I got linked up with guys who used to host poetry events. And I think that also built my confidence because I was able to stand up in front of people and just express myself. In high school, I used to do that, but then high school was just high school. One day I'll tell you the story of high school. No one can pay me enough money to go back to the prison that high school was. But I felt like in high school, I started expressing myself a bit, but then bullying and being shut down kind of made me retreat. So after high school, now going to theater, you're finding people who are all learning to express themselves. They're being expressive. They're speaking their minds. And you're just like, oh, this is a nice space to be. So I learned how to express myself and I became a lot more confident. I started sharing my work because I used to write in the comfort of the home at night at 3 a.m. So I started sharing my poetry. I started writing in high school, but I never really shared my work like that. And I remember, fun fact, when I was in Form 3, I wrote my first book, Form 3 or Form 2, and it was written by hand in a notebook that I looked for at my mother's house and I did not find because I knew I left it in my mother's house and I was unable to find it. But I don't know if it was thrown away or what happened. But I remember I wrote my first book by hand and I was so proud of it. And I had a couple of people in my class read it, people I trusted, people I was cool with. So then that part of being around multiple people who are so expressive, I started expressing myself a lot more. I started speaking out a lot more, which I think, again, was a way of me learning to love myself, learning to love my voice, learning to love the way I dressed. I became more expressive with my outfits. I started learning how to delve into different parts of art that weren't necessarily my stronghold. I was like a strong writer, but I didn't think I was a strong performer, for instance. So I started learning how to perform, and I would perform. Like, I would walk into a space, you wouldn't know that it's my first time doing something. Anytime I would do something, I would do it like I've been doing it for 50 million years. Even if in my head, I'm just like going like, I have no clue what I'm doing. But you know what? We started this, we're going to finish it. The first audition I ever went for, I got the part. I went with people who'd been trying things here and there. That was my first time ever auditioning, and I got the part. And not only did I get the part was a leading role. I was the leading lady in the first play I ever did. And it wasn't like just like a play, those ones in high school or for the church functions or whatever. It was in the theater. We performed the show at Ukumbi Mdogo and people paid for tickets. We didn't have a lot of people paying for tickets because this was also a really young theater company. But people paid tickets to come watch me on a stage. Like, yo, do you know? Do you know how insane that is? The thing that I learned about embracing myself and loving myself when I was doing this production, the first production, was I was a huge tomboy, and I used to wear baggy clothes, so baggy jeans, baggy t-shirts. This was for me for comfort, and also I used to have really big boobs, and I didn't like having big boobs, and they were so obvious. And when I would talk to people, if I'm wearing a dress or whatever, people would be staring. So it was like, if I wear a baggy t-shirt, it makes you listen to me instead of just staring down my cleavage. So I was a tomboy, and I used to wear my baggy outfits and whatnot. And the director told me, so this character you're playing, she's very ladylike. She's very feminine. So you need to start showing up at rehearsals. This was, I think, 2 weeks to the show or halfway through the rehearsals. I had to start wearing heels. This was my first time wearing heels. I had to start wearing skirts and just tops. Like, I had to dress like a lady, if that makes any sense. But he was just like, I need to see, so because he was trying to get me comfortable in those clothes. That way, when we get on stage, I'm not over there like pulling my skirt, being like, oh my God, why is this? Why am I wearing this? And I think that helped a lot. Because at first, I was so uncomfortable. I was mad uncomfortable because I would carry now the heels to wear during rehearsals when I'm doing the rehearsing, when we're doing the play. And then I would still come in my sneakers, but I had to wear the skirt all the way and the tops. And again, people would be staring at my cleavage and it was so uncomfortable. I'm like, why are they staring at me? And at that point, I think I didn't like people looking at me. And I thought it was because I don't know what it was. I think they wouldn't see me as pretty or as deserving to look very feminine. This stemmed from being compared to my sister a lot in terms of looks. So throughout my entire life, I was constantly being compared to my sister, where anytime we'd go anywhere and I'd be there with my sister and I say, oh, this is my sister, people would be like, oh, she's so much prettier than you. Always. I don't know what it was, but like that was one thing that I noticed at the time. It was always, your sister is so much prettier than you. So for me, I was like, I didn't care at that time because I was always like, oh, I'm smarter than her. Because again, the one thing that I used to get complimented about was how smart I was. In school, I was a very good performer. I was always top 3. I used to be given those awards for best students and that kind of stuff. So for me, in my head, my retort would be, well, I'm smarter than her, right? But I didn't know what it is about my sister that made me so different, because I know we don't look alike. We don't look similar. My sister and I have very different features. We don't look the same at all. Actually, all of us, me and all my siblings, you wouldn't know we're related unless we told you we're related. We don't share features like that. So I was used to not being seen. I was used to not being the center of attention. I was used to not being noticed. And then now here I am wearing these clothes where people are noticing me. So I don't know if for me, I attributed it to the clothes at the moment, or I just thought it's the reason, the clothes are the reason people stare at me. Because even now, people still stare at me. Like I walk down the road, people will stare at me. And it's very different. I think I have healed from whatever that nonsense was, because I'm always like, yeah, of course. Like, have you seen me? That's usually my reaction now. But then it was just like, oh, stop looking at me, because I thought if they saw me, then they'd be like, oh, but she's not even that pretty. So it's easier for you to not see me than for you to see me and be like, oh, you're not even good looking, or you're not even pretty. So this was teenage Muthoni, 19, almost turning 20-year-old Muthoni. So now we are here and I'm being put center stage and I'm being told, listen, all eyes are going to be on you. I'm being dressed in clothes that make me very uncomfortable, and I have to wear them because I can't say, oh, can this character be a tomboy? The character I was playing was a journalist she was an investigative journalist who had some dirt on the president of the country at the time. And so I had to be very poised. I had to be very presentable at all times, even when it was like we're going toe to toe for whatever reason. So I had to be very confident on stage while being very uncomfortable. So Muthoni was very uncomfortable, but the character she's playing is very confident. So what would happen is anytime I would step on stage, I would just like inhale the character, exhale Muthoni and inhale the character, because I'm like, this chick, she's a boss. She knows what she's doing. She's in charge of her world. If she can intimidate a whole freaking president, Ash, what is a stage? And after that show, I think I started carrying myself like that outside the stage as well. So that was a learning point for myself as well. Because I remember before we did the show, we had to go get our nails done. Like the director was so intentional with this. Got my nails done for the first time. That it wasn't DIY. It wasn't me doing it. got my hair done. And it's like, because I had like nice, beautiful, natural hair at that point. Or I had a wig. I don't remember I had to wear a wig. That was my first time wearing lipstick. That was a lot of fasts on that stage. But the person I was while we're doing rehearsals and the person I became after we did that show, two different human beings. I learned so much about myself. And I think the director really, his name is Peter Tosh, by the way. Shout out to Peter Tosh. His company is called Liquid Entertainment. And if you come across anything they do, support. So I think he really challenged me to see more of myself than to just be a performer. Because I was just like, I can put on a show. You want me to put on a show? Cool, I'll put on a show. So it was more of me learning where that came from and then digging deeper into who that person was. When I was doing the plays and stuff, I was also taking classes in mass communication. When I was choosing mass communication, for me, it was like it would open me to different possibilities because I could end up in advertising, I could end up in PR, I could end up in broadcast where I'm like, an actual journalist. I could end up in print as a writer, columnist, and that kind of stuff. So for me, I was like, this tracks with the things that I like. So mass communication was the choice. And even in class, I was very expressive. And again, it always went down to, for me, it's like, we can put on a show. You want us to talk about what? Let's talk. We can have a conversation. But it was never, even at home, if you ask my mom, the one thing my mom used to always say is like, when power goes out at night, I will entertain you guys. I'll tell you stories for days because I always have a story to share. And for me, I never correlated that to anything else. It was just like, it's just who I be. It's who I am. And now that translating into what I do right now, I'm like, I'm so grateful for that shit, Came full circle for us. In learning to love myself, I had to learn to love that person. Because the spaces I'd walk into where that person would be considered too loud, you are talking too much, you are too expressive because you show up with your braids and they're so colorful. And it's just like, but why? I learned to love that loud Muthoni. I learned to love the quirky, jokey Muthoni, the storyteller, the talkative girl, because at one point I felt like people were trying to shame me for being talkative. And I was just like, it's who I am. If I have a story to tell, I have a story to tell. And it would also show, because when I was in spaces where I was uncomfortable, I wouldn't talk as much because I'd be like, I really need to be out of here. I really want to get out of here as soon as possible. So in my head, I'd just be like, how do we leave? How do we leave? So I had to learn to love that person. And that love didn't come from, people are loving that person, so I have to love them. It was me asking myself, but why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you love that person? It's because it's who I am. You can only repress who you are for so long. That's one thing I believe in. It's like you can only pretend to be someone you're not for so long, because eventually that shit catches up to you. Your real self will just show up. We don't all have to be quiet. We don't all have to be civil. We don't all have to agree on everything. And that's okay. Another thing that I learned from doing that play is that I don't have to only be a tomboy, that I can actually be very feminine and whatever, and it's still me. Because even in dressing the way I used to dress, being a tomboy, that was because I was just a curious person. Like, I used to be the person climbing trees. Being the firstborn daughter, that also meant I was the firstborn son. So who is on top of the roof fixing the aerial? Muthoni. Am I climbing the roof in my dress? No, I'm in my shorts because I was more comfortable in my shorts. But it was like giving myself grace to exist in multiple forms, because I thought I had to only have one identity and one identity alone. You could only be one person and one person alone. Muthoni could only be one-dimensional. So even when I was like going into theater, I was like, does that mean I have to give up all these other things and the only thing I can be is an actor now? But it's also because I thought, if I find one thing I love, then I can just be that thing And then that's okay. But then later on down the road, you find other things that you love. And now you're like, now I'm conflicted because these things are becoming too many. So does that mean I have to give up one to do the other? I ended up learning that I'm actually multifaceted and multidimensional. I'm not just one thing. And allowing myself the grace to exist as all forms of me that I can be has been such a game changer. That I can be Muthoni, the lover girl, and Muthoni, the feminist in one. That I can be Muthoni, the tomboy, and Muthoni, the feminine chick in one. That I can be Muthoni with the colorful braids and Muthoni, the baldy. Like, it's not one size fits all. And I can switch up whenever I feel like it. Whoever I feel like showing up like today is who I get to show up as. Because also I can be Muthoni the depresso and Muthoni the jovial. Because it happens. So the thing that I have learned the most in learning to love myself is learning to love all of me. All parts of me. And it's not just like the physical, because there's the physical bits as well. And for the physical bits, I think I started loving myself when I turned 25. If I'm being honest, I think it was 25 or 23. One time I really just stood in front of a mirror and just looked at myself. And I saw my eyes and the shape of my eyes. I used to hate my lips. These lips that nowadays, like, I'm always pouting in photos and showing off. I used to. And when I say hate, I actually mean hate. Because I was like, my lips are too big. That was the thing. I was like, why do I have such big lips? Why do they look so big? And then the first time I tried like doing the lipsticks, because you're doing the wrong kind of lipstick, your lips look even weirder. Okay? So I'm looking at them. I'm like, you see, you can't even hide the ugliness of these lips with lipstick. I used to hate my lips. And then I was like, my lips are not even symmetrical. Like, my top lip has a scar, because I have a scar on my lips. I don't even know where it came from. But then this day I'm standing in front of the mirror and I'm taking myself in. I'm really taking in my features. And for the first time I noticed I actually have a beauty spot on my lip. My lower lip has a beauty spot. And I was just like, okay, that's cute. I was like, okay. And I took in the shape of my eyes and I'm like, oh, okay, I actually have nice looking eyes. My nose doesn't look that bad. So that was like, I did that with my face. And because the only feature that I used to love about myself are my hands. I always loved my hands and my fingers. And I think the reason I loved them was because my nails grow so beautifully. Like, my natural nails are such a beauty. And I think by extension, I was like, because they grow on my fingers, then that means my fingers look nice. And if my fingers look nice, then by extension, I have nice hands. So that was the one feature that from the get-go, I always loved my hands. But I never took time to see other parts of me and enjoy them. The process of learning hasn't stopped. The process of learning to love myself hasn't stopped. But now I'm doing different things to show myself love or to love myself. I still do the whole standing in front of the mirror. I stand in front of the mirror and I look into my own eyes and I say to myself, I love you, because I did not grow up hearing I love you. Now I look into the mirror. I look into my eyes in the mirror and I tell myself, I love you, because I think that is so important, because it has to start from within before you can even give it out to others. I think loving other people is so much easier than it is loving yourself. That is something, it's so easy. It's so easy for me to show people love and love people and tell people I love them. But telling myself that I love me, that has taken work, because sometimes it'd be like, I love you. And then it's like, but don't you though? Like, what about? And then your own insecurities start like just popping up, because now it's your own brain questioning you, telling you, What about this? What about that? Have you forgotten this? Have you forgotten that? We're trying to do this. So do we really, like, do we love that as well? And that's why, like, that part of loving all parts of me, even the parts that question me, even the parts that sometimes I feel could be better, even the parts that I feel like I'm still working on, has been a game changer. So in recent years, I've been doing a lot more intentional loving myself. So there's the standing in front of the mirror. I write myself letters, okay? Like, I wrote myself a love letter. Yo! And then I read it to myself. Where? I encourage everyone to do that. Like, write yourself a love letter. It is so beautiful. Yo! Like, imagine how you'd want someone to write you a love letter. I mean, I think I am someone who loves love. I believe I'm a hopeless romantic and everything in between. And there's this one's like, you know, when you're asking yourself, how do you want to be loved? And then you give yourself that kind of love, it's something else. So I've always wanted to receive a love letter, but I've never received a love letter. So I wrote myself one. I was like, I'm going to write myself a love letter. Why not? And it was such a beautiful experience. I've been taking time, like when I'm taking my showers, and I affirm myself in the shower, when I'm getting dressed, when I'm getting ready. The thing that's playing on my mind, it's always me telling myself positive things about myself. It's always like, even when, for instance, like I am mostly sleep deprived on a lot of days because I work too long and too hard. I tell myself nice things. So I'll be like getting ready and I'm telling myself, I know you didn't have enough sleep and that's okay. You're still going to be functional. Don't worry. Once we come back, we're going to take some time and just chill, even if it's for an hour. If we can come back and sleep early, I promise. Like, I give myself a pep talk. And I think it calms me down. But for me, it's also a way of showing myself love. I take myself out on dates. I do things that I want to do, even if other people are not doing them. Like, you know, there's those times where you're like, I want to go for a concert, I want to go for a show, but I want to make sure that people are going as well, or I'm going with a crowd, or I'm going. Sometimes I'll be like, I really want to go for this show, so I'm going to go for it. And nowadays, like, I don't have a problem showing up somewhere by myself. I have really been enjoying my own company. I never feel like I need someone else there for the experience to be worth it, for the experience to be fun, for the experience to be enjoyable. I'm like, I'm fun times. I'm here, so a fun time will be had. I am good vibes. I'm here, so a vibe will be caught, you know? So talking to myself nicely is one of the ways I've also used to show myself love. I think this journey is not going to end anytime soon because I am also an evolving person. So even in my evolution, I need to learn whoever I'm becoming, because as I change as a person, as I become a different person, I have to learn to love whoever that person is going to be or is at the moment. Learning to love all parts of myself includes loving the parts of me that I don't want people to know about, the parts of me that I struggle with, the parts of me that people love, the parts of me that people question, the parts of me that people think are too much, too loud, too brave, too open, too talkative, the parts of me that are just enough, the parts of me that I'm still discovering, you know, the parts of me that I feel could be better, the parts of me that I feel could be different, parts of me that I'm trying to work on, the parts of me that I doubt, you know. I'm learning to love all of that. I'm learning to love all of me. And I would like to know the parts of you that you're learning to love. How are you learning to love yourself? What does learning to love yourself look like? And how do you show yourself love? I would love I would love to know that. You can share that in the comment section of this video. You can share them with me on Insta stories. You can tag the page. You can share them whichever way. If you want to be anonymous, you can also share that. As I end this, there's something that I want to read. It was a tweet that I saw. When I saw it, it was so in line with this particular episode. The reason I want to read it to you is because I want to challenge you, because I used it to challenge myself. It says, "There's nothing more romantic than someone choosing to learn you. Flipping the pages in your soul delicately and digesting your chapters with an open mind, no matter how difficult or uncomfortable some of your moments read. Treating each bookmark with no judgment, but pure love." So when I read that, I was like, oh, I want to be loved like that. And then I was like, do I love myself like that? And the challenge was choosing to learn myself like that. Choosing to be this for me. So I'm going to challenge you to do the same. I think it would be cool. And then, as I end this episode, I told you we are going to focus on joy. And I want to share a moment of joy that I've experienced this past week. And it happened yesterday when I had gone to my mom's house and my grandmothers were there. My aunts were there. We had gone for a family function thing, and a lot of my extended family was there. And my moment of joy was when my grandmother was talking about my granddad who died last year, and she mentioned that despite the struggles and everything that had happened in their marriage and their lives and everything, because one day I'll tell you the story of my grandfather, and he wasn't like an amazing husband from the stories I've had. But she said that by the time he was passing, they were friends. And for me, that was like a moment of joy, because I struggled a bit after when my granddad died with thinking that my grandmother had spent all this time with this man. And I was wondering, was she happy? Is she happy? Is she going to struggle? Because she'd spent like 60 plus years with this man. He's the only man she's ever been with. And I was just like so concerned for her. But then her sharing that by the time he was passing, they were friends, which for me means they made amends. And whatever that would have meant for them, is that was my moment of joy. That my grandmother is okay. So yeah, share your moments of joy in the comments as well. I'd love to hear, or you can share them with me. Tell me what your moments of joy were this week. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Thank you for listening to this episode of Just Doing Life, the podcast. We are on social media. You can find us on TikTok at JDL the podcast, Instagram at JDL the podcast, and on YouTube, in case you are interested in watching our visual episodes, we are Just Doing Life. Thank you so much for spending your time here, and I hope I'll see you in the next episode.